Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Tomczyk, and we have gathered here today because of our great guest. Please allow me to introduce to you Mr. Jonas Bengtsson. We are here today to talk about his books. I think mostly about Sus, Life of Sus.
My name is Adrian Tomczyk, and we have gathered
here. I just have to quiet that down. Mostly about Life of Sus, or Sus in original, but I think perhaps maybe about Fairy Tale and Submarino as well. Hello.
Hey.
Hello,
Hi.
Jonas.
Good to be here.
If you don't mind, I would like to ask you for a starter. What are your feelings toward knives?
When I was a kid, when I was a child, I loved knives because they were kind of dangerous, and because they were dangerous and they were like good handiwork. And then I kind of forgot about them until I wrote Sus, and now I have very, very recently given myself like a very nice German chef's knife as a present. So I might be getting into knives again.
Okay.
But now for cooking.
Okay, that's a great, very healthy hobby, I think. Okay, so could you tell us about the Bellahøj on the outskirts of Copenhagen? Could you tell us something about this settlement to kind of introduce us to your world?
Bellahøj and also like the neighboring Nordvestkvarter, northwest part of Copenhagen, is where quite a lot of my books takes place, and it is one of the neighborhoods that's now being sort of gentrified. But for a long time, this was kind of like the bad part of Copenhagen. And I lived there for maybe 20 years. Now I moved back to the suburbs where I grew up, but I lived in that neighborhood, in that specific neighborhood for 20 years. And where Sus lives is modeled on my own apartment, where I lived for 8 years. After I got divorced, I moved there in this like 7-story concrete building. So I didn't have to do any research. I'm lazy. I don't like researching. So it's much easier to write about your own apartment and then put somebody else there.
Okay.
But it was always it was not a nice part of town. The way I got the apartment was because the woman who lived in this apartment before me was killed by her ex-boyfriend. So when I moved in, the police came and had to look it over once more and look for fingerprints on the outside of the apartment as well. Again, they've done it before. So it's not a nice. It's not a nice part of town, really.
Okay, I forgot about the important thing. If one of our viewers and listeners would like to ask Jonas a question, just post it on the feed with the questions and comments. I can see the feed all the time, so if anyone writes anything, I can just ask or a question. I can see that many people are watching already, so let's get back to the questions. Your first book, Amina's Letters, was about Janus. Chase. If I butcher some of the pronunciation of the names or anything, just please forgive me. Janus, about Janus chasing Amina. Submarino was about two brothers, and the fairy tale was about the relationship between a father and a son. And what I'm wondering, what made you finally make a girl a young woman a hero of your novel?
I had wanted to do this for a long time. I'm a huge admirer of Ingmar Bergman, who has these great characters, great female roles. So I have always thought I'd love the idea of writing from a female perspective. But with Sus, it was more like an accident, because I had written a novel that didn't work out. I'd like thrown away 3 novels already. But this was like the last thing I wrote that it didn't work out. It really didn't work out, and I had like a small nervous breakdown because I couldn't get it to work. And I was sitting in hotel rooms all the time and trying to make stuff work, and it didn't. But Sus was like a minor character. She was this like small, dangerous girl that just like was like hanging out with some bigger boys or some grown boys. And that was like the story of the father was there, and she was, in this version, even more aggressive. She was like a little psycho. And then I threw away this novel that didn't work out at all, and it was a relief to throw it away. But I still loved the Sus character. I still really loved her and wanted to do something with her. So like the 300 pages I had already written was like gone, but the character stayed with me, Sus. And then I thought, hey, I will give her her own novel. I didn't use any of the material I had written, but I wrote her like her own thing, which I'm very happy about.
Okay, so now after the success of the book, are you going to publish those 300 pages you left out?
No. And what happens is I kind of cannibalize my own material. So I kind of, if there's a good character and I like that character, I might take that character and use it in something that actually will work. But in the end, I can't go back to something I've thrown away because I have already cannibalized the material too much. And also, it didn't work out. Believe me, it didn't. It didn't work out.
Okay. I believe. And you said you love her, I think. Why is that? Why do you love Sus so much?
I think she's one of my best characters. And I think she is... I mean, I've been mostly writing about men. And some of them have been quite like physically strong or mentally strong. And Sus is interesting because she's not physically strong, and she tries to become mentally strong. So there's so much more resistance. And resistance works very well, I think, in literature. And I can sympathize with her a lot. I mean, my story and hers I'm not like, she's not like a female version of me at all, but I can really sympathize with her being all alone in the world and trying to not like go down with a major depression. I mean, I can totally, I have never really, she smokes a lot of hashish all the time. That was never really my thing, but I when I was in my 20s, I did like beers maybe a little bit too much. Maybe we all did, but I mean, I could easily be like drunk for a couple of days at a time. So I mean, I get that part as well.
Okay, and where did you get the idea for the character for the character for Sus?
I have no idea, really. This is the honest answer. I don't really know where ideas come from because I'm not like searching to, I'm not the kind of writer who says, I would like to write something about how difficult it is to be like this and that. It's more like I get the idea and I don't really try to examine where it comes from. But if I can't not write the book, I will write it. If that makes sense.
Okay.
It's much easier with a fairy tale because I just like become a father. Also, Submarino as well. That's like the whole son-founder thing. That must come out of me becoming a father. But Sus is more. Maybe it's about the neighborhood, really. Maybe it comes from the neighborhood I lived in. That's the closest I can get to that. The neighborhood, the ugly neighborhood.
I was wondering, why is she like that? Because there is a lot of people and characters who live in such neighborhoods but don't act like Sus. But perhaps the answer is still a neighborhood. Maybe that's the reason. That's all the reason we should need.
I mean, the parenting, of course, the parents not being good parents, I think that's like the main part. But also, I'm very interested in how we are shaped by where we live. And if you have like these 5 huge concrete buildings where she grew up, it might be in Copenhagen, but this like small neighborhood, just like the 5 concrete buildings, is going to like form and shape a person. Not everybody is going to become like a violent criminal, but they're still going to be shaped by where they grew up. Everybody is, I think. If you grew up in a small town, that is going to stay with you your whole life as well.
Okay. I would like to say two more things about the Polish version. Cover was designed by Ula Pogowska. I hope Ula will see this transmission someday. And it was the book was, I think, masterfully translated by Iwona Zimnickiej, who also translated Fairy Tale and Submarino. And I wanted to ask you to mention translator and to ask you about your writing style, because I think you're not telling us everything, and you let us our minds fill out parts of the story. And where does that come from? How do you write?
I think it comes from like, I mean, it comes from like 2 places. Of course, the writers who have influenced me to some extent are usually quite minimalist writers. So I strongly believe in maybe forcing the reader to make his and her images on their own. I like that. But also, and this might seem a little far off, but I also think that there are 2 ways of writing. You can either just try to communicate with the words, like giving as much as you can, trying to connect with somebody through the words and explaining as much as you can, and then writing a lot and filling out everything is a good thing. Or you can try to maybe paint with your words, like use them like somebody would use paint, and leave out a lot and trying to make it very clear and simple, and every sentence should be kind of important. Okay. You usually only see that when people are writing poetry, but I try to approach it like that, even though I write longer stories, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think it does. Thank you for this answer. Do you know more about your characters than you write in your books? Can you imagine their future? And why I ask that? I'm wondering about the Sus, and does she have any future ahead of herself?
I think she has, definitely. Because she's still alive when the book ends, and she's very young. So anything can happen. And things might go very wrong for her, but also they might go quite right for her. I mean, she is mentally stronger when the book ends than she was when the book began. And she is a tough little fish, and she might like take the world on. But I don't know. When I write, I try to not know much more than my characters do. I try really, like with the last couple of books I have written, when I wrote my first novel, I knew everything. I had everything planned out. I knew everything that had happened to them through their entire life, and I could, like, it would be a novel in itself with all the stuff I knew. But now I try to say, if my main character doesn't know this, I don't know it, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you write any scenes? Are there any scenes you wrote for this book and you think are maybe too strong, or they reveal too much? You already said that there is some material and it's not good enough, but is anything too strong? Because I think this is a very strong book, and it has many scenes that stay with you, with the reader after they finish. I'm wondering if you had anything else, but thought, no, that's too much.
I mean, there's a lot of chapters that I have shortened, and I always do that when I write. But I don't think there's some chapters I threw out as well. But that's just because it went in a wrong direction, basically. It kind of went off track. But there's nothing I threw away because it was too strong or because it said too much. Because I kind of knew the tone when I started writing the book. And I kind of knew that I wanted it to be simple and kind of straightforward and not extremely plotted or very complex. So I didn't have to write a lot of scenes and then throw away stuff, really.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Let's talk about names. In your novel, we meet my namesake, Adrian, who's a boy with a muscular atrophy. Discovers that he's probably the one person in the whole world that she's not afraid of. And I think I know why she's so scared, but at the same time you made her so aggressive, and I'm just curious, how is that possible? Why did you do that, and how does that work in your book?
I think we have a tendency to think that just because people are weak or might seem weak, they're not aggressive, and that they are not, and that they're good people. And people are not necessarily good just because they're not able to hurt other people at all. I think for Sus, it's her limitations are, of course, certain mental limitations, but also some basically physical limitations. Of course, she's only like 19, and but she's also, and she's a woman, but also she's a very small woman. She's not like a big girl, strong at all. And she knows she needs to be. That's why I liked her being a girl. If this was about a boy who just wants to kill his evil father, and coming from that sort of neighborhood, it might be easy for him. I mean, it might not be that hard. He might lift some weights, do some steroids, take some martial arts, and that would be it. I wanted it to be very difficult for her, but just because she's small and physically weak doesn't make her any less aggressive.
Okay. Okay. One more thing about this character. You wrote something like, "Who the hell would name their child Adrian?" And I was wondering, was that some kind of? Thank you.
I feel bad about that now, of course.
But what was that, some kind of act of revenge, and perhaps someone lost a bet with you? Why Adrian?
No, it's just, I mean, it's quite simple. Adrian is a very uncommon name in Denmark. And the idea is that he's already in a wheelchair, or he's born with this disorder, this disease. So why also give him like a name that stands out? He's struggling with enough. So don't give him like a in Denmark sort of weird name at all. So that's it's quite simple.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. A colleague of mine, Katarzyna, asked me to ask you about the cat and his name. Could you remind us the name of the cat, and did you have any other ideas for his name?
At first, I didn't think he should have a name at all, because I mean, she doesn't. If you name something, it's that much harder to kill. So she doesn't want to give him a name, and then she names him after these like these drops you get for your sore throat. Gone tomorrow. We haven't done mine. And I mean, when I found that name, it was like, that's perfect. That is sweet. So I like that name. I love cats as well. So.
Okay. Any other ideas for the cat, for the name of the cat? Or not really.
Not really. No.
Okay.
Talking about names, and I used to think a lot about the different names, how I name characters. And in my first book, I made I don't want to call it a mistake, but I called him Janus, which is like maybe too symbolic a name for somebody with schizophrenia. And a lot of people criticized me for that because it's too easy. I like the name because it's extremely close to Jonas, my own name. And I like the fact that it would be easier for me to write about somebody who's named almost have the same name as I do. But since then I try really not to work too much with symbolism in names. I really try to work with the sounds. If you have a name, you have also like a feeling of who that person is going to be. Like names and characters like work together, I think. I say like the sound of the name give you an idea of this is a strong or weak character. It's quite simple, but that's how I do it.
Okay, and why then you called Sus? Why this name? In Polish, I think it's Zuzanna, Zuza.
It's the same in Danish. It's short. It's short for Susanne. And it's like it's a short name. It's a feminine and short name for a small girl.
Okay.
It's sharp. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We have some questions. Adriana asks, Jonas, can you tell us about your favorite Danish writers?
Oh man. I prefer to talk about other writers that's not from Denmark.
On your bookshelf, I would just like to add, we can see Chuck Palahniuk, Ernest Hemingway, and so many more, Stephen King. So perhaps not only Danish.
I'd say Jens Sonnergaard was a very close friend of mine. He passed away a few years ago. He's like one of the Danish writers I would definitely recommend. And of course, Karen Blixen and others. But I have not been that good at reading Danish writers. Just a second here. This is like, if you haven't already read her, I would definitely recommend Agota Christoph, a Hungarian writer, which has formed me a lot more than any contemporary Danish writers, I'd say. I'll also just to be like to try to win over the Polish people. I have my collection of Krzysztof Kieślowski films here, which has meant, like, he's one of the directors has meant the most to me, like especially Decalogue, really.
Okay, that's great. I think a lot of viewers will be very pleased. And about those writers I mentioned earlier, like Palahniuk or Hemingway, I think they too write in maybe not very similar way, but their prose is also is quite condensed, I think.
Yeah.
Are they one of your favorite authors?
They are. And Camus as well. And there's a Swedish writer who passed away last week called P.O. Enquist, which is like one of my... He has meant much more to me than any Danish writers. His Swedish. So yeah, I think all the writers you've just mentioned have informed me. Not that I've ever been like trying to write as they do, but you know, if you read something at a young age, and it's great fiction, it stays with you, and you learn from it, and then you can forget all about it, and it's still with you when you write. You
said Camus. It's Albert Camus, the French writer. Yeah. I think he's one of the favorite authors today on the planet. For well-known reasons. Okay, one of the Polish journalists, Kinga Dunin, called Sus, Życie Sus, a novel about the real life of Lisbeth Salander. Both are hurt girls with emotional disorders, trained and ready for aggression, and operating on the border of the law or far beyond. In turn, Sophie Oksanen said that it is some sort of cynical version of Pippi Longstocking. Which comparison is more accurate?
Definitely the Pippi Longstocking. Definitely. I love Pippi Longstocking. So I go for that, and I think that for me, Salander's, she's too much of a superhero, really. So you have
and Pippi is not.
Yeah, but that's okay because it's a fairy tale. See?
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's the whole difference. I think that with Salander, it's a male writer, maybe falling a little bit too much in love with this overpowered superhero kind of... I mean, she's basically Tomb Raider, isn't she, Lisbeth Salander?
Yeah, few differences. Okay, we have another question from Agnieszka. What about knowing the past? I wondered that in both Life of Sus and Fairy Tale, the author reveals very little about the past of the characters. Is it about a mystery, or the current state of the character testifies more than events?
For me, it has to do with, and one of the reasons I give so little when it comes to the past is because when you write, this is my feeling about it, when you write too much about the past and when you give the reader too much backstory on a character, the reader will be like, oh, that's why they're doing what they're doing. That's the only reason why. Oh, so he's very unhappy because his mother broke his foot when he was 5 and his pet died. And that's like that character in a nutshell. Now I don't have to think too much for myself. And I think that's problematic if you do that as a writer. But I also think that, like, generally in life, we are not summed down to like a few things that happened when we were children or that happened in the past. It's like a pseudo-Freudian way of looking at people. Just saying, oh, you got these 3 things and that is the character. So I try to remove it. I did a very hard job at, especially my first novel, that's not translate into Polish, but I have a schizophrenic main character, and I didn't want people to say, "Oh, that's why he's mentally ill." Now I know why. I never wanted that to happen.
Okay, but on the other hand, your characters are a bunch of broken people, hurt in many ways. So you give some sort of justification for their state, I think.
I just don't want people to write them off, really. Because if you as a reader are able to see, oh, but that's not me because that didn't happen to me, so that's not me.
Okay.
It's too easy to say, oh, but I'm not that character. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, so speaking of fairy tales, I'm curious if did you have anyone who read fairy tales to you when you were a child?
Yeah, my mother did. She used to read fairy tales to me, and then when I got a little older, I read them for myself, and I still do love the Brother Grimm's fairy tales. But also the Slavic fairy tales with Baba Yaga and that kind of the hard fairy tales, the dark fairy tales. I love that, and I try to
shocking news for your readers. Yeah,
I try to everything I write. I try to make it something that's both really realistic, but also kind of a fairy tale. I want it to work on both levels, if that makes sense.
We will get back to fairy tales in a minute, but there is a question from Joanna. She is asking, do you like, I'm going to butcher the name, of course, do you like Peter Hoek?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And do you know her? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Smillas, yeah, I do, yeah.
Okay, because let's get back to the fairy tales. I have this strange notion that time after time you write fairy tales, but maybe fairy tales gone wrong.
Yeah.
And also, of course, you write about families. And why those fairy tales? Why is it a theme that comes up every time?
I mean, the first two novels I did, they were more based on Greek tragedies, really. So, like, the Greek mythology was interesting to me at that point. And then with the fairy tale and Sus, it's definitely fairy tales that inspire me. And I love the fact that if Sus wants to kill her father, yeah. But also at the same time, it's her father, but also it's like he's a monster. He's not like a monster. He's an actual dragon. He's an actual troll, a monster that she wants to kill. She is really taking on the role as a knight who is going to venture out into the world and kill a monster. And if I can really tell that kind of like a basic story that you'd see in a fairy tale and still keep it very realistic at the same time, I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay. All right. Do you think you'll ever stop writing about families and writing fairy tales?
No. No. But I mean, everything is families. Everything is basically families because everything can be traced back to some extent where we loved as children. And do we have love in our lives? So I mean, I never really thought about writing about families, but I thought about writing about love and writing about outsiders. I've always written about outsiders, basically. And that's like people who are not in a functional family are almost per definition an outsider. So I don't think I'll stop writing about that, really. I don't think I can.
I think fairy tales are also not about well-functioning families, so that works out pretty well. Marta Andrzejczak has 2 questions for you. One is easy and one is harder, I think. First one, what do you think about Polish writers? Do you have any favorite writer?
I have read too few Polish writers, really. I must admit. I don't read that much. When I'm writing, I find it hard to read. And so I read kind of slowly. So I know a lot of people read a lot more than I do. But I would love some recommendations of good or great Polish writers. I'd love that.
Okay, I will send you some. So I guess that bookshelf behind you is your wife's bookshelf.
Just because I don't read that much is not the same as I don't have the books, you know.
Yeah.
It's a mix. Yeah.
Okay, so Marta asked about one more thing. I did not read your book. How would you sell me this book if you would work in a bookshop? I think that's a great question.
Oh, I would tell you this is probably one of the best books written in like the last 100 years or so.
That's a great strategy.
Yeah. I would oversell it, definitely.
Ka-ching.
Yeah. And then I tell her if she wasn't convinced, I just tell her to steal it, really.
Okay. Okay, I think you're wasting your talents as a writer. Maybe you should think about a different job. Can I ask, what did you do? What was your job before? Full-time writing or before? Just before?
Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. So I had different jobs. Like the longest thing I did was, you must have something similar to that in Poland, but the Gallup Institute, where you phone people and ask them what kind of soap they use and what they're going to vote the next time. And I hated the job, but I could sleep very late in the day and I could stay up in the evening. And I did that for a while, and I drank a lot of coffee doing that job because it's in the evening and you have nothing to do than to talk on the phone and drink coffee. So when I came home from that job, I couldn't sleep because I had 2 liters of coffee. And that's how I started writing. I couldn't sleep at night. So that's basically, I haven't had a lot of jobs that worked out for me. And then I found writing, and I found, okay, this is something I might be kind of good at.
Okay. When I was writing a biogram to your book, I was looking for some clues, for some answers on the internet, of course. And there are some information that you worked with TV and or radio programs for children, for youths. Could you tell us a bit about that? Because that sounds interesting and it connects to the whole theme.
I did that when I was in my early 20s. So when I started writing, I hadn't done that for quite some time. It's not like I went from television or having like a successful TV career and then went into writing at all. It was done. And this is like maybe 20 years ago. So I did that for a while. I did children's television as a presenter. And I didn't like the fact that I couldn't swear on television. That I had a hard time not swearing.
That's a deal breaker. I
like retakes and retakes over the same things again and again because I have like a natural desire to swear when I can. And, you know, when you're 20, you have no interests. I didn't have any interest in children. So I did it as good or as well as I could. I did children's television, yeah.
Okay. If you would like to swear now, I think that's okay.
That's good.
Okay. Camila asked, you talked about names used in your novels, which give the reader a certain picture of the characters. Why didn't you name Martin's father in Submarino then?
Yeah. I wanted. This is my thought on it when I wrote it. I thought that I want him to be everybody at the same time. Like, I don't know if this is true, but my thought back then was, if I give him a name, we will all, as readers, know, well, that's not me, because my name is not that. So by not giving him a name, I thought I would kind of force the reader to some extent to empathize even more with the character. Because if he had been called, I don't know, Carl or something like that, it'd be like, okay, but I'm not Carl, so this is not my story. That was the thought behind it. And I always had a hard time naming characters as well. I don't like it too much.
Okay.
I like it more now, but back then I tried not giving names to characters, which is hard if they're talking to each other and stuff.
Okay. Jonas Strzelec wrote a question in Danish. I won't embarrass myself, and I just waited for the English version. So I asked about Hoek, because I saw his book on the shelf behind Jonas.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's a great guy. We used to be at the same publishing house, so I've kind of met him quite a few times. He is quite interesting, quite strange. I really loved Miss Smiller's Sense of Snow. I love the fact that it's a crime story that's not really a crime story. Yeah, I really like his stuff. This is something we did like a month ago. We alphabetized the whole bookshelf, which is like me feeling a little bit grown up. For the first time in my life, I have a semi-alphabetized bookshelf. This is big stuff for me.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have books by colors, so I think that's great as well. There's a lot of criminal themes in your books as well. They are definitely not crime novels, but there are many themes that seem criminal. There are drugs and violence and that kind of stuff. You were never tempted to write a proper crime fiction novel or a thriller?
I mean, honestly, I love the question, because for me it has been about taking, especially with Sus, it's been about taking something that very easily could be a crime story. Like the whole revenge thing is basically a crime story, and then say, okay, but how would it really be? What would it really be like if we forget about the genre, crime fiction? What would it be like? Because in crime fiction, it's always very easy to get a gun, or not always, but most of the time, if people want a gun, they got the gun. For me, it was interesting to say, well, in real life, it's not easy to find a gun. And even if you live in a neighborhood where it's not that hard to find the gun, it's going to be expensive. You're going to have to buy that gun from somebody, and you're going to have to come up with some money to buy that gun. So for me, I like working with themes that are basically in the crime genre, but then trying to make them as a drama. and trying to like say, okay, let's forget about how people would do this in crime fiction. Let's see how it would work out in real life. I find that interesting. I have been tempted to see if I could write something that would be actual crime fiction. And I tried to do that this time with a new book. Or at least I had the idea of doing that. And then everybody was like, it's great, Jonas, we really love... I sent it to a couple of publishers and all like, we really love it. It's not really crime fiction, is it? I was like, it's crime fiction, damn it. I wrote a crime novel. No, we really love it. We want to publish it, but it's not really crime fiction. So I mean, I might not ever be able to do that, but I will. I'm more interested in the characters than the storyline, basically, and I want it to be hard to find a gun in whatever I do.
Yeah. I've read Sus, so you really don't have to tell me this. And I deal with crime fiction as well, so I'm wondering, do you have maybe some favorite authors of the crime genre you could tell us?
I like the old crime writers. I like the old American hard-boiled crime writers, like especially I think Dashiell Hammett with Red Harvest. That was like one of the first books I ever read. So Raymond Chandler as well, but even more so Dashiell Hammett, the old private detective stories. I love the private detective as a character. I never cared too much about like the police stories or the police crime fiction. I always prefer like this lonely man or woman that has nobody in his or her life, that goes out and trying to right a wrong.
Okay.
And I have been trying to do that with my next book as well.
Yeah, you mentioned your next book. Can I ask what will be your next novel about? I'm pretty sure it's going to be something very pleasant.
Yeah, exactly. No, I had the idea of, and keep in mind, I tried to do a crime novel, and everybody says it's something else, and I might agree with that. But I had the idea that I wanted to have like a private detective, but they don't really exist in real life. So I can have a private detective, and I didn't want to have a policeman because I mean, there's way too many policemen in crime fiction, especially in Scandinavian crime fiction. They're usually always people working for the police. So I didn't want to do that as well. So my simple idea was that I would prefer to have a criminal as the main character, searching for a friend who has gone missing. That is the setup, basically. So he can kind of take the role as a private detective, but he's not. And him being, he gets out of jail. That's like the pitch. My main character gets out of jail, and all he wants is, he wants hookers, he wants a steak, and he wants some coke. That's what he wants. And he wants to see his 2 childhood friends. And then he finds that like his best friend ever has just gone missing. And this was a great guy who was not a criminal at all. He was like studying to be a dentist. So there's no reason for him to go missing at all. Mm-hmm. And then he searches for him. So I have the main character searching for the guy, and then I have like the guy Malik who was studying to be a dentist, and then the other friend who became a police officer.
Okay.
So I kind of have like the mix between these 3 stories, and I have tried to have my main character be the least sympathetic guy ever. Like, he is a true asshole, my main character. And that was interesting to write. This is not a nice guy. This is not a guy anybody wants to meet, ever.
Okay. I'm definitely gonna buy this book. Okay, we have one more question. We have, I think, like 7 or 6 minutes left. So if any of you would like to ask anything, just let me know on the chat in the section, comment section. Okay, so the question: what kind of music do you listen? That's the first part, and the second is, when you write, do you write in total silence, or maybe do you listen to some quiet music, or how do you do it?
I listen to music always when I write, and I try to find music that suits the tone of what I'm writing, and it's. I think when I wrote Sus, I was listening to a lot of Tricky, the English producer. Okay. I listened to a lot of Tricky. I listened to a lot of David Bowie when I wrote A Fairy Tale, like Bowie all the time. And I've been writing a film where I almost entirely are listening to Jacques Brel, the Belgian singer. But I go from rock to jazz all the time. That's like the main 70s rock and jazz music. That's my, yeah. You know, like John Coltrane and Miles Davis and the old big ones.
Old big ones. Agnieszka asks, have you ever thought about writing a sequel to one of your novels?
Yes, I have. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. But I could write a sequel to Sus, because I am interested as well in what will happen to her. She's so young, and I'm also interested in Adrian, the character.
Oh, stop it.
I mean, there's a lot of story in how he became a drug dealer, and that could be something I might like to write. But the rest of the books, no. I think I ended them where they should end, really.
Okay. I'll be waiting for the book about Adrian then. I'm sure it's going to be your greatest achievement.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And how do you like the next question from Camila? How do you like the Submarino movie adaptation? Did you participate in its production?
A little bit. I read some of the drafts of the screenplay, and they let me come with a lot of notes, and I have a few notes, but not in that they didn't have to listen to any of my notes. I think that it's hard because as a writer, there's also always something you want to do differently than the filmmakers, and that is how it is. But I really liked, as a whole, I think it was a very strong movie. And I loved the actors. I think they did an amazing job at bringing the characters to life. Yeah.
Okay.
He's amazing with actors. Thomas Vinterberg, who did the film.
Okay, thank you. Piotrek said Per Olof Enquist needs a new home in Poland. And that sadly his works are currently unavailable here. Some people said that Sus is Joanna wrote that Sus is a character who deserves their own piece of literature. Thank you, Anna. Okay. I think that's. I would like to ask you 100 million of other questions, but you would hate me for that. And I would do too. So perhaps it's a good time to to bring it home to finish this. Okay, Agnieszka writes that she would love to read the continuation of Life of Sus. I totally agree. Thank you, Jonas. Thank you for being the headline, the star of our home book fair or something like that. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the listeners and all the people that are here with us. And I'm waiting for your next book. I think I'm not the only one, so keep on
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been great talking to you, and I really strongly hope that I'll be able to come to Poland as soon as the ban is lifted. I'd love to. I've been there like twice, but I'd love to come back to Poland at some point in the future, really.
I do as well. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.